let's continue our discussion of techniques for creating these turbulent skies. This one here is still a work in progress. I have a couple of variants, and I wanted to show not only how to do this kind of turbulent displacement, but also a couple of other things. Sometimes when you work with these, there may be some glitches. There may be a place where perhaps there is a sudden jump. And as you scrub through the timeline, you might notice a sudden, like it stops for a second, or just one frame, all right? 1 or 2 frames, it's bright, it's slightly off position, and at times it's easy to see when just playing it, right there near the beginning. First of all, there's a jump at the end. That one we need to make looping. So if you play it from the end or near the end, and then go to the next frame, it jumps to the first one. But that's a big jump also in the image, in the animation. So that's definitely something we can address by making it loopable. Simply right-click on the frame sequence here and select Make Loopable. And you can say how many frames you want to sacrifice. Let's go about halfway. We have 192 frames total. You see that up here. You could go to frame 195. Or 95, that would get you roughly into the middle of it, right? And so you have the last half of the frames that are being blended over the first half of the frames. And so now, as you animate, it's not showing a jump as much anymore, but there's still a tiny little glitch every once in a while. And when that happens, you may have a frame that's bad, and it could be for a variety of reasons. But rather than try to fix the reason or try to figure out where it happened and redo everything, one thing that may be simpler is simply to fix that one frame. Now I can't actually find one here where it's shifting, so I'm going to produce one artificially just so you get an idea of what it might look like. One is, for instance, it might just be a little bit brighter, right? So something like this. Boom. Just one frame. Right? So as you go through it, you may not even notice it if it plays too quickly, but yeah, it might actually be intentional because you may want to look like make it look like there's some lightning activity in the sky here. So for a very split second here, you might have a bit of a brighter scene. But what if you didn't want that? You can simply select that one frame. Perhaps it's good to go locate it on the timeline here. This is roughly in the middle, so put this timeline in the middle and you'll see the frame that's highlighted. All right, so this one here is darker, this one is darker, but this one is brighter. And you see the motion, but it is brighter. And so what you can do is simply right-click that frame and extrapolate this frame. Right, and it will be an interpolation between the prior and the next one. Right, it will be between this one and this one. And there are some changes. You can see it move, slight movement. Right, so it will produce for this one, extrapolate this frame, it will produce one with the motion interpolation, and it will produce a very nice frame in between. Another scenario might be that the frame is not brighter or darker, but maybe shifted a little bit. It might have a little shift added to it, and so if you have that for whatever reason, it might not be something you did. Let's reset this here and okay, cancel that. Let's say we have filter, transform, shift, 238. That seems very high. Let's give it 0 and 0. Yep, that's the original. And so let's say we have a shift of 3 and 5. Okay, just for this one frame, right? So all the frames here are good before, all the frames are good after, but there's this one frame here that makes a little blip. If you notice anything like that in your animation, no, it's not your evil neighbor that did that. you can fix it. Okay, it's easier to fix it and forgive whoever caused or whatever caused that. So what you can do, again, you can right click and extrapolate this frame, and voila, it's now fixed, and acceptably fixed anyway. So we can fix that, right? So now, how did we get to this animation in the first place? This kind of turbulent-looking motion in the skies. It actually, believe it or not, started with a very simple image. let me go and clear or free this animation and get rid of the animation toolbar. So the animation that we started from, let me store this image just in case I might want to go back to it. The animation, or the image it started from, is this one. Actually, that's not the whole image. Let me restore the original. There. Okay, it's a photo, right? It's in fact, this is not even everything yet either. Let me go Control V to replace the original image which I had in the clipboard. Alright, so here's a picture I took this morning. The sky was breaking. It's kind of a high, what is it? A high, not cloud level, but more like a fog, but a high cover layer, and it's gradually burning up. We're close to the Pacific, so there is some clouds. And kind of a fog layer, but it will break up. The sun is starting to heat up on top, and it's going to disappear. So there are some parts where you can already see the sky bluish tint here, right? And if you look at it and you're not sure if it's blue or gray, because sometimes it's about the same shade, what you can do is simply increase the saturation, or maybe go to hue saturation value, and at that level just increase the saturation. So that might give you a better idea, or even change the hue and you see the red or the blue or the green, and that tells you, oh yeah, there must be some blue there behind it. So that's the sky showing through. And what I want to do is really select a portion of it. Now you could select it with the rectangle selection tool, something like this, right? Maybe use the control and shift it around, control key, to select the area you really want. Maybe redo that if you want a smaller area. There you go. And then simply crop to that. Image, crop to selection. Now there's also a crop tool you could have used, but this is a quick and easy way. And maybe this is still too big. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Resample that down to 2000 by 9. Let's keep the aspect ratio and make it 1280 by something, or a little margin is not gonna be a bad idea. Let's give it 1400 by something, and then here let's make it an even number so we can certainly save this more easily. Maybe 624 or something like that. Nobody's gonna notice that we have a slight distortion on this here. I don't know why we have the marching ants showing here. Let's go clear that and store this image. So we have one updated image. Okay, so what I want to do is create an animation where there's a bit of a flow going from left to right. And to create that animation, I'm going to use actually a paintbrush. This is a paint program. We should have some paint brushes. Right click on the brush tool, or pull this little thing down next to the browse for media, or actually go do browse for media, and either way look for the category called effects brushes. So these would be organic effects like these, right? So these are, nope, that's actually not it, or is it? There's some smoke trails. There are some other effects there. Okay, I want some smearing. So let's take the big one here, smear 100. And when we smear along that, that's nice, but it's a little bit too narrow. We want a little bit bigger, so let's make that brush wider. This is a custom brush. Once it's over the 50 range, it's a custom brush. So we can use the brush menu to resample it. We can see how small it is right now. Let's go make it bigger, or you can double up and keep that. So now we have a trail that's a little bit bigger. And what I want to do is not have it that smeary. Not that much. So I'm going to reduce the opacity of the brush, right, and have it only a little bit showing that smear. Now the thing is, I want to do that again and again, so I can go over it and go over it again and go over it again, and I want to do that in a way that it animates it. So I'm going to go actually set the opacity even lower, something like this, and then create an animation with the starting frame, just about 5 or 6 frames. Let's give it 6 today. And so we have 6 frames that are identical. Let's go to the second one and give it 1 brush stroke. And then we want this one to have the same. Just do a Shift A, not A as in again, but Shift A to really again, meaning same brush stroke again. That will paint it once, and then do it again, and that paint it paints it twice. So here the next frame will go and paint it 3 times. Shift A, Shift A, Shift A 3 times. And then the fourth image, Shift A, Shift A, Shift A, and Shift A. So we'll do it, basically we create a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We do a sequence of repaint events that will smear it more and more as we scrub through these. There's a couple of other ways to do something similar to that. You might want to explore this tool, the gradients, right click that, and there's a tool called the warp tool. And so when you use the warp tool, you see this here, you have a bias you can work with. I think by default it's around here, and so that will warp some space-time continuum here. If you go down to the lower level for warp, that might produce an interesting, for the bias that is, it might produce an interesting option there too, right, to kind of warp it and do a little bit of a transformation with this. And then that way you can even do a little bit of side movement. Not everything moves the same. There's a little bit of disruption. There's even some going back, 1 frame at a time, do a little bit of a different display. So you see now here how it's doing all sorts of wacky back and forth. And this kind of twisting motion is something we can extrapolate with the motion prediction module. So let's go and store this current animation into memory. It's a very short one. And go to the animated filter, motion prediction module, and tell it we need about 20 or so more. Right? So do a dry run. Leave it at the default parameters for the search distance, or give it up a little bit more, and for the grid spacing you can use the default, which is 12, and then set the fudge factor to a very small value, like 1 or 0 even, and uncheck the scan for dropped frames, and go. So we're going to have AD1 frames now that are the result of the motion prediction module. Let's make sure it's not a dry run. Let's make it so, and actually perhaps more than 20. Let's give it 44. So we will have 177 frames with interpolation. Now that's an interesting case, but it's not quite detailed and turbulent enough yet. Right? So we can easily start from a single image like we saw, but there's a bit more we want to do to give it a bit more of that realism that we saw in the original. So one thing to do is, first of all, the first frame is the same as the last frame. Let's get rid of the first frame, and now we have a slightly better usable animation here, but still not quite what we're looking for. Nonetheless, we need to store this one here. Let's store it to disk. It's starting to get a bit big. And one thing we can do is use it as a displacement map to itself. So we can simply flag it as an animated swap image. So this stored copy here is now also in the swap image, and we can see it if we click this big button here in the upper right, the preview. We can see that it is darkening it, so there's evidently something in the swap image. We can switch to it to see it. It's identical. It's actually a copy of itself. But that is a good starting point, or not the only one, but an interesting one, to go to the filters again and displace by whatever is in that swap image, and it's going to move over time, right? So let's use, for instance, the regular displace, and that might already produce some interesting detail here. You can see that. Well, not only in this static image, but it's going to animate it. So let's click on Annie and apply that throughout the whole animation. Right. Now, sooner or later, you're going to find some parts that are still boring and some other parts that are really dynamic and interesting looking. You might want to zoom on to those, right? You might want to go to the image and use the crop tool and say, you know what, this area here looks interesting. Let's go something like this. Let's go something like this. There, right-click that, and just kind of zoom in on this area. And then perhaps we also don't need the whole animation length. There's some part that seems to be repetitive, or some part that seems to be not so interesting. Let's set a in marker here, and then go to about here and set the out marker, and right click that selected block and delete the block. Right? So we have now a shorter animation, and we can even make it loopable. Right click again and make loopable, and say roughly in the middle, so we have a constant animation that loops onto itself, and seems to be constantly repeating. Still going too fast. We will slow this down later, or actually now we can go with the motion prediction module once more. Again, animated motion prediction module, and this time not 44 copies, just 2 or 3 is fine. Let's do it 2 times, and we'll get roughly twice the number of frames. Let's give it 0 for the fudge factor. Search distance a little bit bigger, and this one we leave at 12 by default is fine. Uncheck the scan for dropped frames. Do we want 129 frames as a result of this? Yes, let's do it. And so we have now an additional level of interpolation, and we can probably store this one and further displace it. So this is something you want to do not just once and then give up. You want to keep doing a few more iterations at it. So I'm going to close these so we can free up some memory and perhaps keep one of them. And then so here again, the first frame is going to be tossable or removable. Let's delete it, and then we have an animation like this. Let's go store this one in memory so we can do this quickly if we have plenty of RAM. And at that point, let's flag this one as the animated swap. And what could we do here? We could perhaps invert the image before we further displace it. So invert this one, right? And so we still have this animation here. We still have the original without the inversion stored and used as an swap image, and we could combine the two together. By default they're being multiplied. We could do a divide, and that sometimes will create some really interesting contrasts. Let's scrub through that to see. Oh yeah, look at that. And this is really where you have another 30 more choices, right? Look at all these different levels of let's see what reflect will do. Not so much. Let's see what we have for exclusion. Yeah, sometimes that's what you're looking for. There's a lot of different tracing paper. What was the first one? Divide. I just luckily hit the jackpot here. Let's go divide. Okay, so I'm gonna go merge these together, right? Merge with swap along the animation. Sure we do. Okay, now it's flickering. That's doing the rendering. Let's play it back and see if it's somewhat stable. Yeah, look at that. Looks beautiful. Now we still can also use that as a further source for displacement. So let's store this animation one more and say this is our displacement map, or we can go to the original, this one here. Doesn't matter, one is going to do a good job to the other. So let's see what happens if we go and do one more, a displace by swap. This time let's do a pool displace. With pool displace there is quite often a lot of tiny little turbulence you can have. Now that looks great for marble, right? But you got to be careful not to do too much of it. It's great for displacement as well if you keep it in check and do something like this. Now down here at the bottom there's a cut. We'll probably have to get rid of that by turning it, making it seamless again. But this is an interesting one, and oh, look at that! I love this part. We might want to zoom into this in the end, but this is just too beautiful. Let's go and animate this. Okay. Now, if that wasn't it, simply clear the stored copy and restore. And then what you can do is say, okay, yeah, we'll still use this guy, but this time not with the pool displace. Let's use a different. There's a color twirl displace that I like a lot too. Has always been very good to me. Let's go and do a couple more. Something like this. Animate it. Yeah, that looks good. There's definitely some chaotic turbulence happening up here. So let's see once it's done. This one takes a long while, so be sure you have a fast computer. All right, so that's an interesting one. Let's restore to the prior and see. That's the thing. What you want to do is kind of experiment and get a feel for what happens with color twirl, what happens with normal displace. That one's pretty good too at times. Oh, this one definitely. You don't want to go over here. Again, that looks more like glass, and that could actually be really good for some glass surface or ice, right? Melting ice. There is something within the ice. What was that? Marcus Rothkranz had a movie idea about water, and they go get this iceberg. That was the title. And there is something behind the ice or inside the ice. They found something. Anyway, so here's yet another type of texture. Let's go back to the original. I'm going to create the same normal displays. I'm going to use that, but only a little bit, so we can use that for some turbulent clouds rather than turbulent ice, or moving something behind ice. All right, so that's definitely a good one too. All right, look at that. Let's zoom in a little bit here. Even has a bit of a cartoony look to it. Okay, let's play this. It's breathing. It's almost looking like it's breathing. It's alive. And okay, so that wraps it up for a couple more ideas on how to start with something as innocent as a really bad picture. Something like this. And you know, sometimes you need to move it around a little bit. You might find that you have it, but it's a little bit off, so you use the shift filter to shift it around. Where is it? Transform, shift. And as you shift it, you notice there is this cut, so maybe you need to first make it seamless. And these are all parts of image make seamless. These are all parts of making the whole image or even the whole animation seamless, right? And so at that point you can go and transform it. Sometimes instead of moving it around, you also want to rotate it. So what you do, once you have it seamless, you can do a lot more, because you can go to transform and you can make it smaller. Now this area around it, you can tile it because it's seamless. You won't notice. Well, I mean, you might see a bit of a zone that's being tiled if the seam is very narrow band, but you can use that, and you can also rotate it, right? So there's a lot more you can do with it, and then even apply that to the entire animation, right? Now I'm not going to see a very intelligent use of this because these are different frames. I only had one image here in this last case, but yeah, you can definitely do a lot more there as soon as the image is seamless. So what was I think it was the first. No, it wasn't. It was one of those. Oh, and I lost it. Oh no, there it is somewhere. Just scrubbing through it really quickly. There it is. One more. There. All right. Okay, so thanks for watching. Stay tuned. We'll have more of really beautiful turbulent clouds.